What is up, everybody? Thank you for joining Nick and I here today for the Texas Children's Houston Open. Nick, we've decided to go live once again for the show. If you want to do so, be sure to jump into the chat, ask us any questions about this tournament. We'd be more than glad to answer any of those questions. But before we get into all of our favorite fades, plays, and opinions for this week's event, two things, Nick, that I very quickly want to mention for everyone listening. So, first off, I want to thank Win Daily Sports and Jason Mizrahi for once again letting us go live on their platform here at Win Daily. Go check out all of their stuff.
Real quick, I didn't even ask permission, so we can still thank him, but better to ask forgiveness than permission in this life is
we've stolen. So Jason, thank you for letting us steal the platform here today. So but if you're not doing so already, check out Win Daily. I was on their DraftCast last night. The entire site is buzzing with all the content that they have for all sports. Nick, I know you're going to get back into football at some points in a couple months here. So be sure to check out everything that Nick does for Win Daily for football. And then second, if you're not doing so already, sign up with the code BGP at Underdog Fantasy. They have drafts, higher, lower options. Their fun rivals feature that places players against one another for you to choose who will be better that week. All those options are available for you to play the game how you want. Once again, code BGP gets you a 100% match bonus of up to $100. If you have any questions about all the great perks of Underdog, feel free to contact either myself on Twitter at TL Sports or Nick at Sticks Picks. Nick, how are you doing this week?
I don't know. I mean, last week was kind of a disaster on the MME side of things. Again, 3 bad weeks in a row. I don't really know. We took a week off of the show last week again, but I don't know. I don't really know what to think about this field. I'm seeing Scotty right now at 52% ownership, and my odds, I had him at like 3.2 to 1, so it's like we would refuse to bet him for the most part when he was sub 10 to 1, besides you at the player or API, right? APIs when you had him, which was fantastic. But I can't bet someone when I have him marked at 3.5 to 1, even when the odds are shorter than that in the real market. So I don't know. It's tough. I will go over my quick betting card real fast. It's very minimal. I tailed you with Max Gracerman. He's also on my season-long fantasy team, which I am in first place. No need to talk about that. Grayson Sig, top 40 over at BetMGM, where Ty's paid in full at plus 140. I think it's I wouldn't say anything's a safe bet, especially with me and my placement record this year, which used to be my bread and butter, and that's kind of been pissing me off a little bit. But with good bankroll management, it's still been a manageable year. I just so many second place finishes again last week with Cam Young. But we don't need to complain. We'll keep moving on. And then Steven Yeager at 50 to 1. But yeah, the Max Gracerman numbers at 250 to 1. We will talk about him when we get down the board on the DFS side of things. But overall, just really excited for Augusta. I think I've kind of mentioned that too. Like the Florida swing has never really been that beneficial for me. I've just historically not done very well there. I think maybe the Honda, our Cognizant now, has been an event that's been okay for me. The API a couple of years ago was good, but other than that, it is what it is. I don't think I've had a lot of success in the Texas run. I feel like I've played Brian Harmon way too many times in the Texas run. Oh, shit. I didn't even want to mention his name. Brian Harmon last week, dude. Oh, my God. Like last week, and this pisses me off too, like last week was a contrarian's dream. I don't know if any chalk got across the pay or the cut line. Maybe Nick Taylor, and he was kind of like mid-range in comparison to who was around him, but man, if you just faded anybody 20% or higher last week, you were probably in fantastic shape. Hoping, obviously, I don't even know if you needed Malnati to be that successful in DFS last week. If you went heavy on Cam Young, which was one of the guys I wrote about, and one of the guys I went extremely heavy on in DFS, but other than that, I had combinations of Brian Harmon and Cameron Young everywhere. So I think we're at the point where we blacklist Brian Harmon for me. I think it's just, I'd rather just never have them than to go overweight and it just die in my face. So another long answer when I thought I'd give you like a 1-minute answer. I would love for this to be a quick show, but now that you got me venting, I'm pretty pissed off. Because again, it's Brian fucking Harmon every time. Like, form's great. Iron play could not be in a better spot. And then miscut. But there was volatility with the weather too. So maybe there's like a DFS lesson to be learned there. When the weather's pretty crazy, kind of just go away from the ownership. But I don't know. It is what it is. So
yeah,
go ahead, unless you got something to talk about on your betting card, because I think you do. You do have. Did you ever get a matchup yet?
no, I never found one.
That is a red flag right there. Spencer does not have a pre-tournament matchup, so would like to give kudos to him for bankroll management, though, and not forcing the play. I think regardless of like you and I's like personal results, that's always been something that we've tried to preach is like don't force a card. For the record, like let me see what I even have at risk right now. 1.2 units. Honestly, I'll probably bet something live throughout the weekend, but I don't see myself punching any tickets pre-tournament after this. This guy sounds so dejected. Yeah, dude, fucking Brian Harm. If you're new to the show, one, thanks for hopping in. We don't go live often, but yeah, if you want to listen to like the last 100 episodes, I'm sure I just talk about Brian Harmon and how I can't stand him. And then I go all in on Brian Harmon last week in 150 lineups and gone.
I am thankful that I didn't take on that much blame from you. I was expecting for my phone to just be bombarded with messages of how did you convince me to play Brian Harmon once again.
I did it to myself. I don't think you even had to talk me into it.
I think it's reached the point right now too, Nick, where it's like it's happened so many times with Brian Harmon that you're almost, I mean, I guess maybe not outwardly, but you almost are desensitized to it in the inside of yourself here. So I don't know. I think you mentioned a really good point though. Like we are a very contrarian podcast and you would expect last week to be the perfect tournament for us based off of that. And everything that could have gone wrong pretty much did. But as you said, bankroll management is key. It's all about finding value. It's for not forcing bets when you're in situations. So we'll move forward. We will move into this week's event. I don't know if it's necessarily the best board to talk about here, but we can start at the top here with Scotty Scheffler and that 40 to 50% number. And what are we doing there?
I see 47%. I'm out on principle. And like, there's nothing like we can't say anything wrong about Scotty. 13K, and Wyndham Clark apparently is battling some potential back injuries. Keep an eye on that. It sounds like he's going to play, but it's like you take Wyndham out, maybe. Like if he withdraws like tonight or something like that, then maybe I think Scotty has a lot more sex appeal. I mean, he's got all the sex appeal in the world. The guy's just fantastic. It's a ball striker's course. I like everything about his game is in fantastic form. It sounds like there's no issues with the back neck issue that we saw at the Players. So, I mean, I'm never going to tell you not to play Scotty Scheffler. I'm just giving my answer that I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go rather heavy on Theegala and Tony Finau. For some reason, I never get pissed at Tony Finau. Like Brian Harmon, yeah, does me dirty all the time. But Tony Finau, I just, for some reason, always forgive him and go right back to mama. But it is what it is. But yeah, I'm going to be out on Scotty Scheffler. I think in a single entry, I'm not playing him. My single entry route is pretty much no punts. I think the only punt I did play in my main entry, single entry, those have been solid for me. MME was fantastic to start the year, but getting cold. But Max Gracerman at 0%. I think that you really enlightened me to him at the Action Network show, and he graded out fantastic for me as well, inside the top 45 overall for both safety and then inside the top 30 for upside. So if you want to talk about him, or if you want to wait till the 6K range, I guess we could do that. But what are your thoughts on Scotty? Say aggregate ownership right now is 45%.
The problem with the pricing, Nick, is while 13,000 is more expensive than anybody that we've ever gotten, it also is in this new pace scale where we're going down to the $5,000 range, which is more conducive of what players should be in general when pricing's that. I think this is very soft pricing. And I think a guy like Max Gracerman, and there's a couple others, it's not just him, make fitting Scotty in very simple. Yep. And I still think you can come up with a rather unique, I mean, when you're starting with Scotty at 45%, how unique are you actually getting there? I mean, what is the downside of Scotty at this point? Like we made every single
argument. He's a free square.
We made every argument of why not to play him at the Players Championship. And it was a volatile course where there's been these mixed and matched results, and Scotty just goes and wins it in back-to-back years. So I don't know. I mean, his ball striking right now is at such an elite level. I don't even want to have it be able to be on a podcast where it can be clipped where I'm saying not to play Scotty. So I think that's just a decision that everybody's going to have to make out there. If you play Scotty, you're going to have to find a way to get very unique and different. I don't think playing Scotty and Andrew Novak and all those guys in the 6,000s that have a lot of popularity is necessarily the route to go, because that's going to be what everybody tries to do there. But I do think there are $6,000 golfers if you are trying to get unique. I like your mentality with Sahith Theegala. I think for me, that's probably the player that I have the most intrigue to. And I even have intrigue, and I think it's possible to make builds with Scheffler and Theegala together and then just go super volatile with the plays down beneath. Like there's a Nate Lashley, there's a Max Grazerman, there's a lot of different options that are going to be, sub 5% that I think have legitimate upside in this tournament. So I think those are my two favorite plays at the top, even with the Scotty ownership. And normally I'm trying to find a reason to fade, but I don't know, Nick. I can't even get myself to give that answer this week.
Yeah, no, and I'm not giving that answer either. I'm just telling you guys where I'm at. But yeah, Scotty Scheffler, like he's a walking top 5 at worst at this point. So yeah, if you like the bottom of the board, I think that's absolutely, you just lock him in and live with it and find the guys that you like. But really, the only guys I liked at the bottom of the board were Max and Grayson Sigg. And Grayson Sigg, I talk about his lack of upside often. Maybe this is a track where he could get a top 20 with this watered down field. I really like Bramlett, I guess, at 6,600, but he's extremely volatile too. So I'd feel like I'd rather take these guys that have like a, 25, 35, 45, 55 implied probability of making the cut, because I just think that a lot of people are going to get 5 of 6 this week if they do force Scotty. It's kind of like the theory I'm going with. So if that works out, I think well-rounded, like even if Scotty gets third and you got a missed cut, if I go higher mid-tier, well-rounded, I think I'm okay sleeping at night knowing that's the decision I made. Is there anybody else? What are your thoughts on Will Z?
Indifferent. I mean, I think pricing in general, like my models, Scheffler, Clark, Theegala, Zalatoris, Finau, that's the exact top 5 of the DraftKings board. I think everybody got priced more or less correctly. I would make the argument that Scheffler is probably a little bit too cheap with this new pay scale that we have, but I don't have a massive take one way or another. It always makes it easier when we can cross off a name or two that my model is lower on, but I didn't necessarily have that answer. Like Zalatoris is probably my least preferred option of all the names 10,000 plus. Like even with Wyndham, I think he now loses some ownership after the answer that he's given about his back.
Definitely.
I'm more inclined to want to play him. That's kind of where my mind goes with it. And I understand that there's risk that comes into play, but if Wyndham now all of a sudden becomes a sub 15% sort of option, he was the biggest threat to Scotty before that injury came into play. So I think Clark makes some sense still. I'm not going to necessarily jump off because of what has been said. I mean, we saw Scotty at the Players not be able to move and look like he was going to withdraw from the tournament, and then still went on and won it from back in the pack. So I don't know. Golf is a weird sport. It's like, I've watched too much golf over the last 10 years of Jason Day on the ground every other shot and him getting through most of these tournaments to know that these guys usually can fight through the pain.
Yeah. So we got the new driver narrative for Tony Finau, which is enough for me to go all the way back in. Looking at pricing real quick, it looks like Bet365 has Will Z as a substantial favorite over Tony Finau. The rest of the market disagrees. BetChris has Tony Finau as a 20-point favorite in that one. Bet Online, same situation. Bovada, very similar there. The Canby shops have Will Zalatoris also as a favorite over Finau, but the rest of the market, Pinnacle, Finau over Zalatoris. So do you think there's any value in fading Zalatoris in this legal market where the sharper offshores seem to think that Finau's the way to go?
I mean, I think that kind of gives you the answer of where the money's coming in and where the sharp movement is occurring there. Every single notable book that I would deem to be sharp has Finau as the favorite. Every single book that's a little squarer in the market has Zalatoris. I think when you're trying to figure out a close decision between the two, it's a very easy way to push it in the Finau direction. And I also, inside my model, it's not a massive difference. I think Finau will be lower owned, even if it's by a percent or two. You can tell me what numbers you have there, Nick, but I have about a 2% difference.
Yeah, I got Finau 15, Will Zalatoris right around 18.
Yeah, that's so about what I have.
For full disclosure, my single entry goes Theegala Finau.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's go to lower nine. So let's go 95 and below. I like Jason Day. He's my pick and one and done this week, mainly because I already burned Finau. I don't think I used Theegala, but I'm assuming that he's going to be insanely popular. Do you believe that to be true in one and done?
I think there's a massive reason to believe that Thigala will probably be the most popular one and done pick, because nobody's going to want to play Scotty here, regardless of being 3-1. There's not enough money. The Wyndham
if you still have him too,
if you still
most
have him,
people
I think
have used him. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Wyndham Clark has completely taken himself off the map with the injury news. And I also think that there's a narrative to be said that there's not enough money in this tournament for him to begin with. And now all of a sudden you throw an injury into the mix on something that is final. One and done's, you need to get the player correct, because if you don't, in our contest that we're in together, I ended up with Scotty Scheffler at the Century. And while I wanted to play him at the API, and I'm kicking myself before the tournament even starts, I can't get the Scotty there. So you have to be very careful with these decisions. I think the Gala becomes the very natural point where everybody pivots to. I think Zalatoris is going to carry some ownership himself. I don't know. I mean, when we drop lower than that, there's probably names like Siwoo that are going to be pretty popular. I like Siwoo, Nick, and maybe this is a flaw in my model where I kind of get caught in this. My model is higher than usually what public perception is, but now this week, public perception also agrees with my model. So I think there's an argument to be made that Siwoo might be a little bit expensive and carrying a little bit too much ownership, but I mean, he's a top 10 projected play in my model, no matter how I shook it. It's really hard for me to get off of him this week.
Yeah, I mean, he's a slight dog to Thigala, even to Tony Finau at DraftKings, so take that for what it's ever worth. But massive favorites over well-respected guys this week, being Stephen Yeager, Keith Mitchell, Alex Noren, Kurt Kitayama, I guess is kind of respected, and then Jason Day.
Kitayama has a bunch of respect at books that I follow. Like in the outright market specifically, I've seen that number declining throughout the entire day. So I think that if you're going to be an underdog to like the two best players in the field, give or take, that are not Scotty Scheffler, like that's completely fine. I can forgive that one.
Yeah. So Siwoo Kim absolutely striping the ball, has gained strokes. He's got to be top 10 in ball striking in every single tournament he's played since Sony. Like lighting it up off the tee, not missing any fairways.
Comes down to the putter.
Strokes and approach, fantastic. Honestly, the scrambling, I believe this is the best scrambling, and maybe not scrambling like statistically if you go to PGA Tour or CBS, but like his short game around the green has been fantastic, which has always been a strong suit in his game. Putter, yeah, absolutely. So lit it up on the greens at the Players. Other than that, has kind of been bleeding strokes for the most part, putting, besides waste management. Looks like he gained there. But yeah, I have absolutely nothing bad to say about Siwoo Kim. I think he's very affordable. Ownership, where do I see Siwoo? 20-ish. I don't know. It's like, I love Siwoo, but when I play Siwoo, he's always like 5% owned.
So that's kind of my only concern to this. I have him at 19%, so right in the same range that you do. I do think there's an argument to be made that this popularity has gotten a little extreme for a player that the putter is still not where you want it to be. Like at least with Finau, I can look at 3 consecutive tournaments of him being neutral or better with the putter. And we know the ball striking with him. Like I'm going to ignore what he did last week. I think that was just a weird tournament for every single player in the field. But I mean, forget ownership for a second. I think Finau would be my favorite player in the 9,000s. Siwoo would be second, which now you can make the argument that ownership all of a sudden pushes him down. And I would probably agree with you. I think Jason Day is every bit under consideration for what he brings to this event this week.
9,400 Alex Noren on principle probably just have to be out. I don't think I could pay 9,400 for Alex Noren. I know he's playing fantastic too, but I just don't feel like I'm going to pay a premium when guys like even Keith Mitchell, I think the market will be down on just because of the collapse on Sunday. I think it's a really good course for him. He has been playing a ton of golf lately, but like Yeager and Tom Hoge, I know your model really likes him. The approach numbers on any course for him are probably going to be fantastic, but I'd rather have Jason Day or Siwoo Kim for $100 or $300 more.
It's kind of the same answer I would give for every single player. In fairness, I gave the 3 most expensive players in Finau, Siwoo, and Day. There's a reason probably why I would rather play them in general. They're also more expensive, but I also would rather just move up in the pay scale. And I think they're better plays than Noren, Mitchell, Hoge. I think those 3 are probably all very similar at the end of the day. I think you probably made a pretty good point about Mitchell, but I don't see anything vastly different between Mitchell and Noren to push me one way or the other.
This is wild. spin rate. So this is something that I like personally look at all the time for myself, and my spin rate's below 3,000, but I hit a draw. Tony Finau hits a cut. I obviously don't have 185 ball speed though, like they do. So pretty wild. 3,000 is it? Like when I hit a ball, it's 3,000 spin rate. I get upset because I probably cut it or hit it too high, but yeah, pretty cool. That's nuts. I can't believe he didn't change his shaft then. If obviously that's something that I feel like I would get mad at. They'd pick that up in 1 hour and go to the shop and change it out. But all right, having said that, 9,000 and below. Let's go 8,000 and 9,000. So we got Jake Knapp down at the bottom, Kurt Kitayama getting a ton of ownership now. Doug Gim, seems like everybody, again, he was chalk Gim last week. No one's going to play him this week. I see like 10% for a guy that's, again, if you just want to throw away the sample size of last week, would be as good as Finau right now in the ball striking numbers. Billy Horschel probably just out. Patrick Rogers, no one ever likes playing him. I always think there's upside, but his numbers for me aren't looking great for recency bias. Bo Hostler, what are your thoughts on Bo Hostler? Like, I feel like, again, like the market fucking loved him to start the year. Not really doing anything with the iron play. Always going to be a good driver of the golf ball. He kind of always has been, but putter's great. Short game's good, but iron play is just kind of like he was priced in like the mid to low sevens to start the season and favored over guys in the low eights. So it's like the market loved him, but I think it's kind of coming back down to life. So not a course fit for Hostler here. What are your thoughts?
I don't think it's a course fit. I mean, in fairness, I haven't necessarily thought it's been a course fit this entire year in a lot of spots, and I think I was willing to forgive that when we saw the kind of form he was putting together. And my model runs things from a very long-term duration of time, and it didn't necessarily take fully into account some of these changes that Hostler had made with the driver, adding distance and some of the approach play numbers that had gotten better. I was willing to throw all that out the window, but now all of a sudden when you've gone miscut, he's missed both cuts at this tournament. Like, if I'm going to try to get contrarian here, I would rather just do it with Aaron Rai or Doug Gim and just jump back into two players that were very popular last week that the market seems to move the other way on. And I don't think it's like, if we're going to give the answer, Nick, and we're doing it for all the high end players of like a Finau or, I mean, Sam Burns, he's not in this tournament this week, but like there's so many names that miss the cut.
Aaron Rai, 30% owned again last week, miscut too, right?
Yeah. It's like, I'm just not going to look into what happened last week and put much into it. Ryan and Gim were two of the hottest players coming into that event. I think the price tag is honestly fair on what we're getting on DraftKings. I think in this like mid $8,000 range is where it should be. And I think this sub 10% ownership mark, more or less of what we're seeing here is a very, very nice opportunity to bet on some of both the safety and the upside that I have in my model. So those are going to be two names that I'm very exposed to. I say this every single week, Nick, and you've heard this for 2 straight years now. My model loves Steven Jaeger every single tournament that we play. The one thing I'm always looking for with Jaeger is what happens with the putter on similar green complexes, because we know that the ball striking can be elite at any single time that he tees it off, but it's that putter that can go the wrong direction. He does have the ability to spike with the flat stick here and there. And anytime that he does spike is where we get those big results. So 70th in my model and expected putting on any course, he jumps all the way up to 37th at this venue. That's the kind of increase that I'm looking for, because I've said this a million times about a million different players, but how you win a golf tournament, and this is a little bit more high end of a golfer than usually the names I'm talking about, but how you win a tournament as like a 40, 50 or worse golfer in a field is you're an elite ball striker who's able to get hot with the putter that week. And then you all of a sudden put together one of those Corey Connors 250-1 Valero Texas Open wins, or Adam Svensson when he won at the RSM a couple years ago. Like, this is more of that like high-end profile with Jaeger when you're looking at that. But I think there's a real big argument to be made that because of this lack of perceived win equity that Jaeger carries to the public, he's probably a 35-1 golfer that got drifted into this like 45, 50, 55-1 range at a lot of books, just because people don't necessarily want to back a guy who has not won on the PGA Tour. And any time that he's come close this year, wasn't able to get the job done. But I actually thought that the 2 top 3 finishes that he put together was an encouraging sign for somebody that had won 6 times on the Korn Ferry Tour in his career. So I thought Jaeger was one of the best values on the board in any market that we're talking about.
I dig it. He is in my lineup as we speak. Anybody like low 8s? You like anybody a lot, or just kind of like the contrarian route of Doug Gim makes sense in like MME style contest, Jake Knapp, anything like that?
I have a lot of ownership around Knapp. I don't know what you see.
Knapp, I see 12.
Like I see 14. I think that's really high from what I was anticipating him being. So that moved me off of him. I was planning to play Knapp thinking I was going to get contrarian with the play. When this got into the 13-14% range, I decided to move off of him. I mean, we're splitting hairs here between ownership percentages. Like at sub 10%, I would have been in. All of a sudden, now you get it up here, I'm out. But no, Nick, I think it's just Ryan, Gim, and Jaeger are probably the 3 in the 8,000s that I'm going to play. Specifically with Ryan, Gim, those are like the 2 contrarian routes to really get a bit different from builds that are going to be put together.
All right, let's go to the 7s. So Cameron Davis, I'm seeing mixed ownership. I would assume no one plays him. Everybody's going to go to Taylor Moore, who looks fantastic. I have nothing wrong to say about him. This is the route to get different, in my opinion. Davis Thompson, have you seen the steam? I was going to text you this earlier. So Taylor Montgomery going into the week. Let's see what his matchups were. He's getting steamed by everybody. Even the Golf Channel talked about Taylor Montgomery being a good course fit because of the putter. I guess expected strokes ante to green look decent for me, but I'm just not a Taylor Montgomery guy. I don't think he's that good of a ball striker at all. He is now a 20-point dog to Davis Thompson, who I was surprised you did not bet this week. In terms of upside and distance matters a lot here. I think you could buy him a gouge. Missing the fairway is probably not as bad with that rye rough that Roberto was talking about, but I still think there's a little bit of a premium to hitting fairways, and he hits it long and he hits fairways.
One of the answers I gave last week, Nick, and unfortunately, like last week, I think there were a lot of plays that we talked about that made logical sense and even played out maybe in the fashion that we thought. Not every single one. I didn't expect Justin Lauer to pull out from the tournament after 18 holes. But when you look at Davis Thompson, and maybe this is what I deserve when you fade Webb Simpson in a matchup, I had Davis Thompson against Webb Simpson, and Webb made a cut. I think it was I always thought it was like a fringe position. It was going to be 50-50 whether he did. And he put the pieces together on Friday to get into the weekend and really did nothing once he did. But you look at what Davis Thompson did, 3 over par, 108th on the leaderboard. He was so bad with his short game. My model thought he should have been inside the top 10 on the leaderboard when I took some of the baseline expected totals that I had for him around the green and putting, and I mixed it in with the ball striking that he did provide. So him and Ben Silverman were the 2 names that just completely lit themselves on fire when I think they were playing very good golf. So for me, those are 2 names that are very intriguing to move here on DraftKings. And I did notice the steam that hit Davis Thompson. I think it makes a lot of sense. It's almost like when he first got released in the market, all you see are like the consecutive missed cuts that he had. But then all of a sudden you dive into the profile of what Thompson did last week, and you're like, well, this is a golfer that whenever he can show his ball striking acumen really rises to the top of a lot of these boards when it comes to those ball striking returns. So I think Thompson at the price is probably one of the better values on the board of what you're going to get down there. And there's a lot of ownership in this $7,000 range that makes it interesting on what the optimal build is. Because you said Moore, Mackenzie Hughes is going to carry ownership. I mean, between the 2, I probably like Hughes more than I like Moore. Who, sorry?
Luke List as well. I'll take Taylor Moore over Mac Hughes. I'm not a believer in Mac Hughes.
I'll probably take both of them over Luke List. I'm just not a Luke List person.
Same.
I guess
putting matters here. Stroke and putting obviously it matters everywhere. We talk about that often, but it seems like it's a good separation here is guys that can get hot with the putter, and I'm not playing team no putt. So I think that's why the market loves Taylor Montgomery.
I like Taylor Montgomery. We've talked about that a little bit though. So that's not me necessarily. I get it. And we talked about it even a little bit yesterday on the action show. that was the closest to a matchup that I was going to punch. It was either going to be Batia over List or Montgomery over List. And my model, there are certain players where my model, when it is aggressively against that player, it's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Like Mackenzie Hughes would probably be one of those answers. Like anytime that I want to fade Hughes, it works. Anytime that I want to fade List, I mean, he's won a golf tournament when he was my biggest fade candidate that I had. So I'm not so sure that my model is quite accurate with List. Plus, he has the distance that you would want for this course. If it's going to be this overseeded Bermuda where it plays a little bit softer and he can use that distance to his advantage, I do think he's a little bit more enticing than he normally would be for that reason. So while I'm not going to play him, I understand the sentiment around him more than some of these other names. And that's ultimately why I got out of a matchup against him. But as you said at the beginning of this show, Nick, if I cannot find a matchup, that's where you know how bad the board is, because it's just me trying to find every reason to not bet a tournament at that point.
Yep. I'm with it, man. All right, let's go 7K and below. Andrew Novak, probably going to be 7 to 12% range is kind of where I'm seeing it. I just put him at 10 for mine. Probably, like, I don't know. I don't play 6K guys that are 10%, but this tournament I don't think will be very volatile. Weather's good. Not many. Whatever. Hey, bring her on. Not much penal. Like you're not going to drop shots and stuff like that. Like, I don't know, not penalties, right? Like OB doesn't happen often, if at all. So I don't know. I guess it's okay. Maybe a better week to play puntish chalk, but there's really not a whole lot of guys that I like in this range. Peter Malnati, whatever. Smalley, I'm still a believer. Sam Ryder, it's fine. I think I'd rather still play Andrew Novak over those guys. Maybe a guy I'd take a shot on is Joseph Bramlett.
Yeah.
Taylor Pendrith, does he have any life at all, or is his game just broken?
The upside numbers of my model continue to like him. The form is horrendous.
Yeah. But I mean, I was trying to tell myself I could play him. I like Grayson Sigg. I'm okay with it. If he's 4 to 6% range, I think Grayson Sigg's going to make the cut. I'm going to plant the flag with you on the 0% guy of Max Grazerman this week. If you had to choose, price agnostic, Steven Yeager or Siwoo Kim?
What are we trying to get out of this?
Just better finish.
If you force me to say which golfer is going to have a better finish, I will say Siwoo Kim. If I'm actually trying to shoot for as much upside as I can, I guess I'll go with Yeager. I worry a little bit about what Yeager's produced recently, like 2 missed cuts. I know it's during the Florida swing, but I know Siwoo's
can't
not
miss fairways at the events that he missed, and that makes sense for him. Like, he's not going to be great at a very tight course.
I think what Siwoo has put together is very impressive. I think it's much more likely that he gives you a steady finish if you're looking for a made cut, and then let's move into the weekend and see what happens. But it kind of comes down to, for me, I'm trying to shoot for as much value and upside as I can. So when I saw Yeager be one of the biggest climbers in my model for upside, you mix that all of a sudden with the reduced price tag, you're going to save $800 there. Plus, in the outright market, you're going to get about 20 points more. It's kind of what pushed me towards Yeager in that spot. But I think they're both good plays.
Okay. Anybody you absolutely love in the 6K range, other than, I mean, I don't know I don't want to quote you saying you love Grazerman. I just think it's a great price, and the ball striking is just fantastic, and he absolutely bounces it off the tee. So I think he can make this place, which is already a short track in general, very, very short, and get to his wedge game, which has been pretty good. So I like the upside profile we got in him.
I think there's a couple options to consider. I guess the question that I would ask you before answering that, the 2 most popular players look like they're going to be Andrew Novak, Joseph Bramlett. Is that what you see?
Yeah, it's 2 I like, so I think I'll probably let Bramlett beat me. I'll probably play Novak. I do like the form. I know he missed a cut 2 weeks ago, but Players, right, is when he went belly up, but last week was fantastic. So I like Alex Smalley here.
Smalley is interesting just in the answer that on Monday, and my model doesn't necessarily like him, but he was one of the most owned players when I initially ran this on Monday, and then all of a sudden everybody got off of him.
I think it's like the name value, maybe early. What about Scott Stallings? Broke up with his caddy.
I'm out on Stallings, I think. That was when
I
was
love
running
Scott Stallings. I don't know why. It just
when
it's
I
either
was
miscut or a top 20. Like that's all this guy does. More
when I
times than
was
not miscut though.
when I was looking for the worst values in my model, Theorborn, Olesen, Luke List, Scott Stallings, Ryan Fox, Cameron Champ, Stuart Sink, Hayden Buckley. Like these were guys that either like for Hayden Buckley, I thought he should be min price. Like that's kind of just options that I want no exposure to. I unfortunately would probably say that outside of Grazerman and maybe Chandler Phillips, I like Chandler Phillips this week also. I think that what he produced was more legitimate than he's being given credit for. And I think it's a very similar answer that we can talk about here with Andrew Novak, to where, Novak has put together 4 top 17 finishes in the past 5 tournaments. And really the Players is the one that's the abnormal volatile one to begin with, where everybody struggles at the end of the day and there's really no consistency there. So I think markets have been slow to move on Novak, and I think there's an argument to be made that the same play is coming into account here with Chandler Phillips. So I don't think Novak's ownership, granted, yes, I don't want to necessarily get caught playing 10% $6,000 golfers repeatedly. I think this new pricing that they have, Novak, if this would have been a $6,000 is the bare minimum price, Novak is what in this field? Probably like 7,500.
Yes, I would say at least
7,700, somewhere in that range. So like now all of a sudden you have a 10% owned golfer that really should be, I think he even should be an $8,000 golfer with the way he's playing, but like a high $7,000 golfer. I don't think that sort of chalk is as bad in a lot of these spots. And I think that there's a lot to like about his game. Usually for me, if there's a player, even if there's going to be a lot of ownership down here, that ends up cracking the top 15 of my model with certain ways that I'm running it. And my model is never that vastly different from what the books are releasing. Like when you get these slight discrepancies, they mean a lot for me. So for Novak to jump into the top 15 in almost all of the iterations of how I built it, and then obviously when I go into the back end and I include some of the sports books totals, he drops a little bit. But when I'm just running my pure numbers from the mix and Novak is grading off the charts, I'm more inclined to be willing to eat the chalk in those spots. So I actually think the ownership is still too light at 10%.
Damn. Okay. Anybody in the 5s?
The 5s gets pretty gross.
I like one guy.
I've
liked him. I've liked him often. It's not Bridgman.
I assume it's Mac Meisner.
It is.
I like him also.
Do you think he will have owner, like his profile, if I take away the name and obviously take away long-term data, because this other player I'm going to compare him to has significant long-term data. I guess not significant, but for the last season, and Mac has none. He looks like a poor man's Davis Thompson.
Sure.
A middle class Davis Thompson. And he went to SMU, Texas guy. I think it's like South Texas, San Antonio or something like that. But why not him? He fills it up. He can scramble. Short game's good. I'm sure he's played this course many times. I cannot guarantee that. I cannot find anything while looking on Google, but I know Roberto had to play him in junior golf and said he was legit. So that means a lot to me. But 5,500 for Mac Meisner.
I think there's.
What's the ownership you see on him?
4.5%.
Fuck.
A little bit more than I was thinking on it, but
that's a Scotty factor, though, right? And
yeah.
So, like, we're not the only ones to figure out that this guy is from Texas and in good form, making cuts. And like again, just like looking at the 5K range, people that are making cuts 3 in a row, he's probably one of the few that checks that box, I would imagine, right? Especially after Chan. I don't know, Chan made the cut last week. He sucked, but he made the cut.
So a couple interesting points about Meisner here. When I ran my model, and numbers have moved, when Meisner opened at 500 to 1, he was the best value I had on the board. If I had an opportunity to redo this, I wish I would have put him on my card. The second best value that I had was Max Grazerman at 250, and that's the route I ended up going there. But I think Meisner has gone now from 500 to, you can probably shop around and still find a 300 in the space. A lot of places have him at like 250, 275. He is legitimately one of the biggest movers, and I think that's credible movement for all the reasons that you just mentioned there. So I like him quite a bit.
You really don't like Taylor Moore, though. I'm trying to figure out my lineup now that I've changed it.
Not really, to be honest. I don't know. I feel like I've gotten more correct more often than not. Like I had him during his victory. I don't know. It's one of those weird spots where, like, if you're directly comparing this upper $7,000 range, my model likes Thomas Dietrich more, which might just be another sickness that I have that I can't seem to get off of. It likes Davis Thompson more at a price that's cheaper. It likes Taylor Montgomery more. Like there's any time that I start finding names that are beneath a golfer that my model prefers, it kind of starts pushing me out of that direction of wanting to play that name. So,
Fair.
And I just think there's a lot of ownership too. In comparison to some of these other names, not that he's going to be 20% owned, but I think he's going to be 10% plus. And when you have that option, and it's going to probably drift even higher than I think it is, there's options that I can find that are sub 5% that I'd rather just get unique that way.
All right, let's close it out. One guy, 10K and above. Who's your guy?
I'll say Scotty.
Pussy.
This is like
I will go with Thigala. 9K and above.
Finau.
I'm going to go. I'm between Jason Day and Siwoo Kim. I really do like Jason Day here.
I think the three players that we have named in the 9,000s, I think that's the three that you should be looking at most frequently with it. So
give me Jason Day.
Okay.
I'll do it. All right. AK.
I'll say Jaeger just because I think he has the most win equity, but this is a great bounce back spot for Ryan Gim.
I'm going to go with Doug Gim.
That's a good pick.
7K.
I might have to go with Davis Thompson here, which is probably going to be what your pick was going to be.
No, you're good. I think I'm gonna lean Taylor Moore in the market. Does scare me a little bit on him.
One question before we move to the next range, because we haven't talked about this player. I would like to get your thoughts on him because my model really liked him this week. Do you have an opinion on Mark Hubbard?
Safe. Let me see where he actually grades for me. I mean, very safe. He's 23rd in safety for me.
He's 17th for safety with me.
Price like a guy you only need to be safe. What's the ownership? I see 8. There's no way. 8% Mark Hubbard. I'll go with 5.
I see 6. So I'm kind of in the middle of those two.
Hubs, what do you got for us in the market here? Doug Ryder, Ryder's up there, right? Upper 7s. Yeah,
Ryder, my model, or he's 69, but my model also likes Ryder. If we want to throw another name in there, that is a pretty decent $6,000 option.
Joel Damon, huh? People like Joel Damon. Course history. His iron form's okay too. I'm good on Joel Damon. People could have that. All right. 6K range.
I promise to stop talking about Joel Damon after getting in trouble for mispronouncing his name about 100 times.
Yeah, that was a good time though. You really like Aaron Rye?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, this single entry now that I've shaken it up. Do I have to pay for Finau? Probably, right?
I mean, probably.
I've done it every week. I might as well keep going. All right, 6K range. Favorite guy?
I'll take Grazerman.
All right, I will go with Grayson Sig. I think he'll make the cut.
I think that's a good wager that you placed as a top 40 when I think you said he was 34th in your model?
Yeah.
When I gave him just a generic finish and didn't count the miscut that he put in 2021, he was 34th for me.
Nice. Yeah, which makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that's probably his peak is probably 20th, but 5K range, I'm going to just go first because I'm taking Mac Meisner. Should I play him in single entry? Like him and Gracerman?
Honestly, Nick, I think he's very playable in single entry. I think Meisner's a good option this week. This is just a mispricing. Anytime that a golfer can be the most mispriced player that I have on the outright board, and you can find him in the $5,000 section, that's usually one of those situations where just sign me up and I'll take my chances there.
Right. I mean, do we like Kurt Kitayama?
I'll
just say what my lineup is right now. I got off Jaeger to go to Siwoo, which I can go back to Jaeger, but I have Thiegs, Finau, Siwoo. So, like, I want guys that could surround the top 10 if I'm playing no Scotty. Kurt Kitayama, Mac Meisner, Max Grazerman. So I have 8,300 for that Kitayama spot. I'm not playing Billy. I feel like I'd much rather play a ball striker like Kitayama, who can make this course look very short.
Yeah.
Or I could play Doug Gim, which I do like Doug Gim. Also went to Texas and grew up like 10 minutes north of where I live right now in Arlington Heights, Illinois. So shout out to that for whatever that means.
You could sell me on Kitayama. I mean, I think one of the things with Kitayama that's at least worth throwing out there, if we're talking specifically about wind play, I mean, this is a UNLV golfer. UNLV gets very windy. I think he's going to be a natural fit. And I also think, like, one of the players I was going to mention in the lower fives, I think Harry Hall kind of has playability because of that reason.
Definitely.
Also.
Yeah, low ball hitter. Does not hit it high.
I think he's a very intriguing play in that $5,000 section. Like, for me, the three would be Hall, Meisner, maybe Brandon Wu if I want to add a fourth there. Like, there were some upside portions of my model that liked Wu. Worry a little bit about the safety with him. And then I'll let you talk me out of this one. Jacob Bridgman.
Lost audio. 1 second. If you can hear me, great. I cannot hear you. So continue. If you want to close us out, just we'll get out of here.
I'll take us out of here on that note, Nick. So you can find Nick on Twitter at StixPicks. I am at Tee-Off Sports. If you have any questions about the week from any perspective, please feel free to reach out to us at one of those handles. Anything else you want to say, Nick?
No. I think I'm going to go with Kitayama.
I think the upside, like if you look at Gim and you look at some of those other players, Kitayama probably has the most win equity. We've actually seen him do it on the PGA Tour. So I'm not going to talk you out of that name. I think Gim and Rye make a lot of sense too. But yeah, if you have not done so already, you can use the code BGP to get a $100 match bonus over on Underdog. The site is buzzing with different sports that you can play weekly when diving into their season-long best ball drafts or pick'em contests. Remember, Underdog has everything you need to gain action for the week for any sport that you want. Nick, anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
No, good luck, and thanks to everybody for tuning in. We got Valero next week. I miss match play.
Best tournament on the schedule. That was the most profitable
last
one.
Year. I need it. I like the mix up too of like not having to do like all the massive board of DFS research. Like it's just a good break right before Augusta, and now we don't have it.
Tons of game theories that went into that tournament. I think on the DFS side they were overplayed. Everybody knew that part was not as great. But I think from a betting perspective, there were so many ways to gain an edge. Like I rolled over Cameron Young last year he loses in the finals to Sam Burns, and I still managed to make 5 or 6 units at that tournament. So there were a lot of different ways to play it. I'm a really big fan when we get tournaments that are not quite the cookie cutter approach that you would expect every single week. So very unfortunate to lose that. But yeah, as Nick said, we will be back for the Valero. That is, to me, probably the one tournament or the first tournament that I really made a name for myself, hitting Corey Connors at 250 to 1. So soft spot in my heart for that event. I'll be excited to see if we can maybe find a similar player down the board. Although I will say, Nick, this might be Steven Jaeger week next week to win that event if he's in the tournament. That feels like the perfect course for him to finally win a tournament. So I assume if it doesn't work out this week for Jaeger, I will be on Jaeger for the 100th time next week. But good luck to everybody out there. We will see you guys back here again next Tuesday.